part of what we do is we create stronger feedback loops in terms of evidence generation and evidence use. We also aim to include diverse voices. I think, look, just by looking at ASC compared to the people in this room, I think you all can see the way that we bring together and think very deliberately about that.
For everyone who I don't know yet, my name is Jaspal Bhatia, and I serve as a program officer with the AIR Equity Initiative. I am leading our justice and public safety and policing portfolio. The AIR Equity Initiative is a $100 million philanthropic venture from the American Institutes for Research, funding the generation and use of high-quality research and technical assistance to mitigate the harmful effects of segregation by race and place. You'll hear more about this from my colleagues later, but before we get started, I want to make sure that we can have Shad Maruna, president of ASC, come and offer some welcoming remarks.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to welcome you here to the conference. I understand this is the first time AIR is here to meet at the American Society of Criminology, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for choosing us, choosing the Philadelphia conference here. I did a little bit of research, and you guys are 75 years old or thereabouts as an organization. This is our 78th criminology conference, so we've both been going about the same amount of time. It's great that we're finally together, and I think as an organization we are seeing a kind of a generational shift happening that I've been really excited to be a part of. So your being here is well timed, but it's also part of that shift in a big way. We'd like to open up more. You know, we've historically started as a interface organization with agencies as well as academia, but over the last decades we've become very much universities heavy, and the same sort of group of universities and the same faces and the same research community, and we really have made efforts at this conference to bridge out and broaden our idea of what is criminology and who is criminology, and groups like yours and the incredible initiatives that I've heard so much about are really at the forefront of that. So I'm delighted to be here. I'd love to have joined you for your meal, but unfortunately I've got to get to my next to these panels. But welcome, thank you for coming, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Maruna. This is a tremendous conference. Before we get started with other speakers, I want to make sure I do a quick shout out to my AIR colleagues who are in the room and AIR grantees. Particularly thanks to Candace and Caitlin for all your help planning this luncheon today. And with that, I will turn it over to Vice President and Executive Director of the AIR Equity Initiative, Rashawn Ray.
Thanks, Jaspal. I appreciate it. And of course, a lot of kudos go to Jaspal as well for managing and helping to lead our justice and public safety and policing portfolio. I mentioned Candace and Caitlin. Thank you all for all that you do. Thanks to all of the guests that are here, whether it be AIR staff, researchers, employees, as well as grantees and other individuals who we look forward to partnering with. So thank you all for being here. The food looks amazing. I look forward to getting some of that, and you all are eating, which I assume means it's very good. I also want to thank the team that we have, Mahogany and LPE, that help us to put together events. It's always important that there are people oftentimes behind the scenes that lead us to being in this space. So as Jaspal mentioned, I'm Vice President and Executive Director of the AIR Equity Initiative. Before being in this role as a professor at the University of Maryland in sociology and also a senior fellow at Brookings, I was an AIR scholar, which are essentially external consultants who help guide a lot of the strategic work and behind the scenes planning. And I actually worked on this particular portfolio. And so as a person who is engaged in this particular space for over a decade, I'm just so impressed with the scholars that we have that essentially come together for this particular portfolio. So as you're eating and conversing, I hope that you'll also look at the posters to see the amazing work that we've done. As Jaspal mentioned, the AIR Equity Initiative is an over $100 million investment to address systemic inequalities by race and place in local communities. This initial $100 million investment is just the start. And where we're going is we're going to be having probably another 100 million where we're going to be making deep place-based investments in local communities around the country. Communities that are underserved, communities that are underinvested in, but have assets that need to be lifted up, where we can actually not just go wide across our portfolio, but also go deep in terms of thinking about the different areas that we focus on. Part of what we do at the Equity Initiative is not only be a convener to bring you all together today, but what we aim to do is to actually be the mission of the American Institutes for Research. As you heard from the president of ASC, AIR has been around since 1946. And part of what we've done is a lot of government contract work that actually helps drive a lot of things that happens in our country where evidence is actually used for equity to make change. Part of what we do is we create stronger feedback loops in terms of evidence generation and evidence use. We also aim to include diverse voices. I think, look, just by looking at ASC compared to the people in this room, I think you all can see the way that we bring together and think very deliberately about that. We think about robust relationships and solidifying these relationships so that when we leave after providing research and evaluation and technical assistance, that we leave communities better and fuller than they were than when we got there. Part of what we do in our work is we focus on 4 key areas. I mentioned enhancing public safety. That's obviously what we're here for today. But also we focus on education equity, workforce development, and community health and well-being. And part of what we do is we think about innovations. We think about intersections and how these areas come together. We also think about impact and the way that we are elevating our work, not just in terms of publishing a paper in a journal, which is important. Look, for those of us that are academics, we know that's important. Or not just putting together a report, but to think about doing ways that one of my mentors called aiming to get multiple lines on your CV, to really elevate your work, to think about policy, to think about community impact, and to really center the people who are most impacted. So I'm excited that everyone is here today. As you heard, this is our first time doing this at ASC. It definitely will not be our last, and so hopefully you all will come back in future years, and hopefully you'll also meet someone new and also talk to us at the AIR Equity Initiative about the work that you're doing so that we can think about how to partner and elevate your work.
Thanks, Rashawn. Next, I'd like to bring up Candance Hester, who leads the Advancing Justice portfolio at the American Institutes for Research.
Hi, I'm Candace. I am a principal researcher at AIR. At AIR, our mission is to generate and use rigorous evidence to contribute to a better, more equitable world. And we do that by working across intersections of systems that affect people's lives. So that includes education, international, community development, workforce, and injustice. To advance justice, we're committed to transformative change that dismantles structural disparities, and we do this with a portfolio that addresses the root causes of harm and trauma with the aim of engendering equitable access to safety, dignity, and thriving. We're deeply honored to serve a diverse set of funders in the justice space, including the National Institute for Justice, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And many of the staff you see here have supported those partners, perhaps most notably Patricia Campi and Roger Jarjora, who have worked in this space for decades to really lay the tracks for the work we have across the continuum of prevention to intervention and reentry. With the generous support of the Equity Initiative, our portfolio and project leadership has grown tremendously in the last few years. So just to name a few examples, I won't be exhaustive here. I want to say in the policing space, I want to recognize the three separate project teams that include staff Matt Sweeney. Matt, do you want to stand? Genesis Fuentes, Abby Jeffries, Sam DeWitt, Jasmine Olivier McGregor, Amanda Lattimore, and Roger Jarjora. And these teams examine the evidence on reform to lay the groundwork and understand the way forward, which can bridge the divide between police and over-surveilled communities. Thank you so much. In restorative practices and diversion, I want to recognize Vivi Sikorsky, Derek Frank, and Maura Shramko. If you guys could please stand. Oh, and I left out Jasmine again. Jasmine, please stand. These lead practices to provide implementation and impact evaluation services to early stage interventions designed to keep youth out of the systems entirely and reimagine how they could serve them better with a strengths-based orientation. And then finally, I'm not going to be exhaustive, but just one more, deepening our connections to those with lived experience and ensuring that we elevate individuals who have the solutions because they're closest to the problems in many cases. I want to recognize Nick Reed, Maura Shramko again, Sharice Hollingsworth, Heather Irwin, and Caitlin Dawkins. Please stand. These folks lead projects focused on building pathways within AIR and communities for those who are directly impacted to enact the structural change we so desire. At this juncture, with the robust partnership of our federal and foundation collaborators, including, in a big way, the AIR Equity Initiative, AIR is well situated to stand in the gap between the current research frontier and the future of effective solutions to build a bridge to a better, more equitable world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candace. It's great to hear about all the great work that AIR is doing. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Odis Johnson, who serves as one of AIR's external scholars, which you heard about from Rashawn. Dr. Johnson also serves as the Bloomberg Distinguished Professor of Social Policy and STEM Equity at Johns Hopkins University.
Thank you for the introduction, and I want to thank Dr. Rashawn Ray, Vice President of the Equity Initiative, definitely Jaspal and Candace for just inviting me here and for the wonderful conversations we've had over the last day or so. So at Hopkins, I am the Bloomberg Distinguished Professor of Social Policy and STEM Equity, and I have faculty appointments in 3 different schools: public health, arts and sciences, and education. I transitioned to Hopkins to become the inaugural director of the Hopkins Center for Safe and Healthy Schools, and brought along with me a National Science Foundation Data Science Training Institute that I was awarded in 2019 and has since then been recently renewed to operate through 2026. Along with these faculty and administrative roles, I've served as the editor-in-chief of the Sociology of Education, a journal of the American Sociological Association, since 2020. And the reason why I provide that background is because if I had to pick one attribute about that profile that foregrounds my work with AIR as an AIR scholar, it has to be the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary mobilization needed to meet the truly cross-cutting nature of our society's most consequential social challenges and opportunities. Put bluntly, there needs to be a shift in research that meets the complexity and the interconnectedness of these long-standing, endurable, and transigent systemic inequities. It was apparent from the start of my collaboration with AIR that the Equity Initiative was a place where this sort of foundation for innovation and knowledge and social transformation could take place. This is clearly the case with the AIR Justice and Public Safety team, and that I advise on equitable policing. The research portfolio in this area is vast, and it addresses the behavior and culture of policing with research that looks into a number of things. One, just to name a few, can't name them all, they're quite numerous, but advancing our knowledge in active bystander law enforcement training, for example, or ABLE training, which has huge implications for advancing community-centered professional norms and de-escalation practices that may lower the uses of force and occurrence of excessive force. It also marshals knowledge, and this is a different initiative, but the team also marshals knowledge and data policy by creating infrastructures, data infrastructures, and cutting-edge data science tools to provide police agencies a way to identify officers who are at risk for causing the public harm. This formative evaluation model with quicker feedback mechanism arms our law enforcement agencies with knowledge that is contextualized with community characteristics and other data sources to maximize important policy and personnel decisions. This is unprecedented work with a number a large number of agencies across the nation that brings benchmark analytics, AIR, and law enforcement together to put in place these processes and really bring about, hopefully, longstanding systemic and structural change. This portfolio also leverages a focus on young people's experiences within schools, with law enforcement and school discipline, and the entire procedural justice continuum. I cannot stress how important this work is given that schools are a critical juncture in the life course of carceral probabilities. For example, from 2005 to 2014, police in San Bernardino, California, arrested about 6,923 youth on the streets, but more than 30,000 in their schools. This suggests that a significant proportion of our nation's imprisoned population may have their first interaction with justice via their schools. Data shows schools with law enforcement have a 12.3% higher arrest rate than schools that do not. And so while school resource officers may perform bravely when faced with deadly violence, as we are witnessing with the rash of mass shootings, it still is largely unknown what are they doing the 99.9% of the time that they're actually not stopping one of these armed shooters. These transdisciplinary problem spaces, resources, perspectives, and initiatives would not achieve their much needed impact if AIR and all of us failed to double down on equity when so many are suggesting we abandon practices and initiatives that address longstanding resource inequalities, structural and systemic racism, and intersectional marginalization. So I have enjoyed my time so far with AIR because we align on so many priorities. The AIR Equity Initiative, with a host of cross-cutting research programs, technical assistance projects, and internal awards to its highly skilled and visionary research staff, are pushing forward on equity, and I'm delighted to be part of that effort. Thanks so much for listening. I'll turn it back over to Jaspal.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. For those of you who are not with AIR, I hope you get a sense of the breadth of the work that the AIR Equity Initiative is funding and the research and technical assistance that the AIR teams are providing. With that, I encourage you to learn more. We have some posters back here at the back wall talking about our justice portfolio and our grantees, and then another poster on our advancing justice work. You can also scan the QR code to learn more about the Equity Initiative and read our annual report and see what projects we're funding in the next coming months. Thank you so much for being here.